All right, welcome to the Norwood Conservation Commission meeting on Wednesday, January 20th. If anyone is recording this meeting, let us know now, please. We're going to start with our opening roll call. As we've been doing in the remote environment, I'm going to go down the list of Conservation Commission members and just ask you to verbally confirm your attendance one by one, starting with myself. Steve Washburn is here. Chris Capizio. I'm sorry, I didn't get that. Chris, did you chime in?
I did. I said here. Did anyone else miss it?
I got you that time. Thank you, Chris. Next up, Peter Bamber.
Here.
John Gear.
Here.
Heather Miller.
Here.
Carly Rockland.
Here.
And Catherine Walsh.
Here.
All right, thank you. First up on the agenda tonight for public hearings, we have Notice of Intent DEP file number 251-05XX, Norwood number N2020-09. Applicant is Norwood Conservation Commission, represented by Chris Hirsch from the Massachusetts Department of Ecological Restoration. Project description is removal of Mill Pond Dam and stream relocation and restoration to restore ecological function and habitat connectivity to Trap Hole Brook. This hearing was closed on January 6th, so no new information may be heard. With that, I believe we're here to discuss or perform the issuing of the actual order of conditions. Holly, do you have anything to chime in with this?
Just that this order of conditions has been reviewed by all the partners involved in the project, and they gave it the go-ahead for what they thought was reasonable. So I feel comfortable with it, and so do the engineers and various other parties involved. Also, I think they wanted to let the commission know that since the design plans aren't final, as the design plans continue to progress, they're going to come back before the commission with 75% and 100% design plans as the project moves forward. So those won't need a new notice of intent, but just for the purposes of updating the commission.
All right, and with no new information being accessible this evening, what would our next steps be, Ms. Jones?
Someone could make a motion to issue an order of conditions for DEP. It has been issued a DEP file number 251-0519 and Norwood number 2020-09, I believe.
Mr. Bamber.
I'll make a motion using Holly's numbers. Those make a motion to approve the order conditions. And Holly, do we also want to authorize you to issue them and sign for us?
Yeah, I included those votes later on in the meeting but yeah, I think that
it would make sense to do it. So
it may make sense to do it now. Yeah. I'm not sure about order of operations, but let's finish with the motion to issue and then maybe make the other motions.
Okay.
Someone wants to second the motion to issue.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Mr. Gear. As we've been doing in the remote environment, I'm going to go down the list of conservation commissioners and just ask you to verbally state your position on this vote, starting with myself. Stephen Washburn is in favor. Aye. Chris Capizio.
Did you miss me again? That's tricky. In favor, aye. Did that come through?
Thank you, Chris.
Oh,
I got you. Yeah. Peter Bamber.
Aye.
John Gear.
Aye.
Heather Miller.
Aye.
Carly Rockland.
Aye.
And Catherine Walsh.
Aye.
All right, thank you for that. And what was the second part of that, Ms. Jones?
So later on the agenda, I had discussion of whether the commission would like to authorize me to electronically sign for commissioners and also physically sign Conservation Commission documents. Perhaps out of respect for Mr. Negron's time, in case there's discussion to be had on that, for this item, a motion could be made just that if those authorizations are made later in the meeting, that they should apply to this order of conditions.
So do I have a motion that reflects what Ms. Jones has just stated, something to the effect of?
Well, you just stated to delay that, didn't you, Holly?
So move that any authorization for electronic signatures and for the agent to be able to sign on behalf of commissioners should apply to this order should the commission authorize use of that form of signing. Heather's
Sure.
the lawyer. How did I do?
I think that'll work.
I'll make that motion. I'm not repeating it, but I'll make it.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Bamber. Thank you. As we've been doing in the remote environment, I will go down the list of conservation commissioners one by one. Just ask you to verbally state your position on this vote, starting with myself. Stephen Washburn is in favor. Aye. Chris Capizio.
Aye.
Gotcha. Peter Bamber.
Aye.
John Gear.
Aye.
Heather Miller.
Aye.
Carly Rockland.
Aye.
And Catherine Walsh.
Aye.
Excellent. Thank you for navigating that so delicately. That was a wordy one. So that's that, then I believe. So with that in mind, pending future approval of a motion that would facilitate Ms. Jones signing in lieu of the commissioners themselves, that would be applicable to this as well. All right, I don't think we actually had Mr. Hirsch here tonight, so I think we can just keep on moving. Next up on our agenda, we've got Conservation Commission business, and we're going to start with a presentation from Mr. Negron. Is that correct? Do I have it right? Correct me if not. Of MEND. We're going to discuss a permaculture design plan for the orchard at Endine that I am very excited to hear about.
Am I clear?
You
Okay.
are clear.
It's nice to meet everybody. I really appreciate the opportunity to meet with you folks and the fact that you're interested in hearing about my idea. So I've been working with the Boston Food Forest Coalition for a few years, and I've worked on a few projects in Boston and outside, and basically a food forest is an edible. A food forest is basically an edible landscape that mimics a natural forest, and it's really that simple. It's a garden, but it's more like a natural environment. And one of the big advantages is that all the plants they work together rather than just trying to independently grow individual plants with fertilizers and pesticides. it's a natural environment, and it's made up. If we could go to the second slide, of perennials and annuals, but it's got fruit, bushes, and trees. It's got some vegetables. It can be almost anything, really, but basically what you're looking at is an image of what a food forest might typically look like. If we go to the next slide, a food forest is made up of what's called fruit tree guilds, and basically each fruit tree has a group of plants around it, and it's a grouping of plants that support a central fruit tree, providing maximum harvest, use of space, drought tolerance, and disease resistance. And that's what I was talking about with how the plants kind of work together. Again, it's just mimicking a natural environment, but it's also obviously manipulated for the maximum efficiency. And if we could go to the next slide, this is what a typical fruit tree guild looks like. So what you're looking at, and just to be respectful of your time, I'm going to go through this kind of quickly, but I won't get into too much detail. But I would love it if you folks are interested in drilling down on some of the details here. In this diagram, it's just an excellent diagram of what a typical fruit tree guild might look like, and you can see exactly what plants are in there. There are things like pollinator plants, insectary plants, being plants that will repel insects. Something like lavender is a typical example of that. There's nitrogen fixers, which actually take nitrogen from the air and send it down into the soil. There's mulching plants. There's several others, but those are just some typical plants that would be in a fruit tree guild grouping. What the process is called when you create a fruit tree guild, it's called polyculturing. So one of the ideas behind this project is biodiversity. Not only would this make the flora more biodiverse, but also the fauna, the wildlife would become far more diverse because of all these different plants. If we could go to the next slide, please. So the plants in a fruit tree guild attract beneficial insects, wildlife, fertilize, mulch, produce nectar to attract pollinators, they repel pests, and they suppress grass. Grass is really not typically a beneficial plant, although there are some native grasses that do provide seeds for a lot of the wildlife, especially things like quail. And if we could go to the next slide. This is the orchard. So if you could imagine, I know it sounds pretty ambitious when you see 48 little trees there, but each tree would have a fruit tree guild. It might be an abbreviated version of a real fruit tree guild, but that's something that you can actually, you can kind of figure out as you go. There's no set design behind this, and a lot of it's trial and error too, believe it or not. But it does. Now that image that is there was taken a few years ago. A guy got permission to fly a drone over there and took that for me, along with a few others that were. This was the best image out of there. But one of the things I wanted to point out with this is that the proximity to the community garden. So what this really is kind of a permaculture community garden. The really cool thing about it is that they're right next door, and this would probably draw a lot of those folks in to learn about a different type of gardening. And of course, they'd always be welcome to work in there and volunteer and learn. One part of this whole process is teaching people about this, and the Boston Food Forest Coalition would be supportive of this effort. They would also potentially be involved with bringing people in and teaching. We would teach things like pruning. We would do a lot of what's called sheet mulching, which is basically taking a layer of material like newspaper, or more typically is cardboard, and putting wood chips on top of it. And what that does is suppresses the grass and weeds, but it also starts accelerating exponentially the microbial activity in the soil. So it actually builds the soil. Now you can see to the right, there's that kind of barren looking soil. The soil in this food forest would start to become very dark and rich. And it would retain a tremendous amount of water. I'm pretty shameless about adding my daughter Ruby into any project or presentation, and that's a image of her at the bottom, standing next to one of the little apple trees. They look pretty, they look a little unloved, and basically what this project would do would it would kind of be a nursery for them, and it would really this would take years to actually see the full benefit of, but it would eventually be a very rich source of food. It would be a very lush environment, and it would be something that that I think people from all over would want to come see, especially in Norwood. If we could go to the next slide. So these are a couple of images of food forests around the area. The bottom one is actually a massive food forest, probably the biggest one in the area, and it's a very mature one called Red Tail Ridge. It is I don't know the status of it now, but at that time we had organized a trip for people from Boston to actually tour this, and that's me with a woman named Maria, who basically is, she spearheaded that. I'm getting into a lot of detail here. I'm probably going to need to speed myself up, but essentially, you can see, you can get some idea of what this potentially would look like someday. There's everything in these. It's only limited to your imagination and what you want to put in it. Everything from nuts to fruits to mushrooms, you name it. Anything can go in here, and it's just a matter of kind of making it all work together. But as you can see from the images, it's kind of a community effort, and it's a pretty awesome thing when you see it happening. The next slide is, I'm gonna read these benefits. I can actually barely see from here. I'm not even going to be able to read those, but I'll go down the main points. I can give you the main idea. And again, I would really encourage you to take a look at this if you're interested. There's more detail in it than I can possibly go over now. So the benefits of the project will be that they protect and they build the soil. It conserves water, recycles nutrients, creates an abundant harvest. One of the purposes behind these projects is providing the community with food, and generally that's anybody that wants it, but there is a focus on the needy community, providing fresh whole foods to them, where they would typically get canned goods, which are typically processed foods. And this is a really important point. Again, I don't want to get too into that, but it's something that I believe is really important. And I do know Father John over at Grace Episcopal. I have helped him begin converting his apple orchard over there on the church grounds into a food forest. the pandemic got in the way. But the idea again is to provide food for the food pantry. That's a really important part of this, concept. It also, as I mentioned before, increases biodiversity. I think we sometimes don't really fully appreciate, for instance, in Ending, the amount of wildlife that could be there that really isn't, and this would provide a tremendous opportunity to increase the variety of wildlife there and create a healthier ecosystem. A food forest eventually creates much less work. There's no maintenance in a mature food forest. There's no watering, fertilizing, very little, tweaking and weeding and that sort of thing. It becomes nearly maintenance free. So it's actually a garden that requires very little work. We mentioned in here it honors Mother Nature and Indigenous peoples. That's Jacqueline of the Boston Food Forest Coalition, adding that, which I think is important too. It gives us an opportunity to engage with the Native American community, and I think that's important as well. It does create a sense of community. I love community gardens, but this is like a community garden on steroids. It brings people together in a much bigger way. It creates health and happiness. It's basically getting people out into nature, connecting them with the soil. There's actually data that supports the idea that having your hands in the soil actually makes you happier. As crazy as that might sound, I believe it's true, and it is scientific data. It does also create social and environmental justice, and by that, it allows people to learn about gardening regardless of their social status. It does create a regenerative environment where we're basically kind of healing the land and restoring it back to something similar to what it might have been a long, long time ago, before man began, manipulating it to the extent that they do today. And that's a pretty elaborate way of saying that it's just a really great project. And if we go to the next slide, this is one of my favorite projects. My 7-year-old daughter actually helped start this community food forest in Dorchester. And as you can see from the layout of it, it's got a gazebo. It does have an art installation. It's got an area for barbecuing. We had a grand opening there, and it was just an entire community coming out to enjoy this thing. And people harvest food from it, and hopefully the image is pretty self-explanatory. This was basically a vacant lot where a house had burned down at one time, and it was just full of trash and rubble, and now it's this amazing, beautiful space. Now, ending that particular project might be something different, or it might be something very similar, but at the very least, it would create a very rich growing environment for those apple trees that are really struggling, and they will continue to struggle. It's going to be very tough to get good apple trees in any amount of time out of that orchard the way it is, and this would definitely help tremendously. And if we can go to the last slide, one of the main purposes of this project, unfortunately, I can't even read my own notes here. I apologize for that, but I'll kind of ad lib here. So these are living classrooms, and basically, I have a project down at Planet Subaru in Hanover where we have a food forest, and this is basically a learning environment for kids. These are not necessarily things that in the past might have applied to the professional world, but we're going to see a lot of change. And as we can all imagine, as of today, that change is probably going to be accelerated, where this type of activity is going to be much more important to fight climate change, to establish micro and macro economies, and support the local community, growing local food, shipping food less, and being less dependent on other countries for our food. As elaborate as that might sound, this is how it all starts, you know. And my vision, my hope, is that someday this food will be in the Norwood Public Schools, and these kids will be learning how to grow their own food. And I would hope that this is every parent's dream, to have kids learning about their food. I like to say from the ground up, and starting to appreciate foods that are grown and not created in a lab. This, I just want to mention one more thing. The new middle school there would provide a great opportunity to kind of integrate that concept of kids learning and having it right there outside the doors of the middle school. With that, I would say I would be happy to answer any questions. And again, if anybody would like to drill down on this, I would encourage them to have another look at it when they have time.
Thank you, Mr. Negron. That was phenomenal. I see Ms. Rockland's hand immediately in the air, and I'd love to hear from her. Go ahead, Ms. Rockland.
Okay. So I'm looking at the photos, and I've been reading about it now, permaculture and food forests, and it seems to me that it needs a base of volunteers.
Yes.
To create it, to sustain it, especially during droughts and extreme temperatures, extreme weather. And then you need like a sustainable group of people who are going to actually use the produce that it creates. And you'll need a lot of, I would think, input from the community about what exactly they would want to take from it. Like, what would they want from a food garden? And so I'm just curious, how would you go about getting this information? Like, who would use this? Who would help you to maintain it, install it, and fund it long term? And all of these sort of questions are what I'm wondering about.
Oh, all excellent questions. So basically, the best examples of how this works and works well would be in Boston. And basically, this would potentially be a Boston Food Forest Coalition supported project. They have the Planet Subaru Food Forest was the 21st food forest, and that one was the official site, rather. And there have been a couple of more that I've heard have started since, but there are quite a few of these sites. All of them have varying degrees of success, and they probably all operate much differently. And one of the things we hope to do is kind of create a standard for this. But essentially, we would have to create a pool of volunteers, and that could potentially work through the Boston Food Forest Coalition, but also my individual efforts. And some of them would be local volunteers. Some of them would probably be community garden people. They would be organized most likely on Facebook. It doesn't take a lot of people to start this project. It just, as it goes along, it probably takes more and more, but then again, it generates more interest. And the other thing that's very important is that a system of corporate sponsorship really needs to be developed. And that would happen through local businesses. It can happen through individuals that work at companies that might be interested in sponsoring something like this. And they can sponsor it by saying, we want to contribute X amount of dollars for tools, or we just want to give as many employees that want to support this a couple of hours on a Saturday to go do it, or we just simply want to say, hey, here's a flyer to go up in the lunchroom. We'd like to see people getting out there to do this. It's hard to say what each company is going to want to do or what level of participation is going to be there, but ideally we would be getting a couple of companies that are willing to say, and one of the ones I have in mind, quite frankly, is Subaru New England. I did get them involved in the projects down at Planet Subaru. They're kind of our mothership, and I do work there full time. They would most likely be interested on some level at being involved here, but rather than focus on anybody, my point would be that I would kind of take the lead at approaching some companies, and hopefully people that are interested in being involved would work for some companies or maybe even own companies that might want to help out. So it's hard to say what exactly how this would work. I don't know, but there is a system of getting it done. We kind of figure it out as we go along, but there is a good support system for helping to make it happen.
Do you have a sense of community interest in this? You know, would it pull volunteers from and people who'd use the produce from Norwood and Walpole and Westwood and Dedham? Like where are you thinking the interest would come from? And have you already heard of interest in this sort of a project here in Norwood?
There are people actually in the area that are already interested in this project if it happens. There are several, and a couple of them from Norwood, a couple outside of Norwood, excuse me. And you mentioned the harvesting and that sort of thing. Those are things that quite honestly they would need to develop, but ideally at some point, and this is after the orchard reaches full yield, which would probably be about 3 years, there would be some sort of CSA that would harvest the food, figure out, and this would be open to Norwood residents. Ideally, they could take what they wanted, but generally I find that people don't raid these things and take everything from them. There's always plenty left over. It just needs to be harvested, and a portion gets donated, a portion can get sold to kind of self-fund. And keep in mind, these types of projects are always eligible for grants. There are lots of kind of ancillary aspects of this that would draw in other groups. The Audubon Society would be an example. There are, lots of, I mentioned Jacqueline at the Boston Food Forest Coalition. She actually applied for a grant through the indigenous community for using this project, to see if she could get funding. But the point being just that these projects can also generate funding by grants, and that can actually, when you don't have the volunteers, sometimes you can just pay people to do it. But ideally, you want volunteers, and that's not very hard to get people involved. And as I mentioned, I would hope there's a lot of groundwork that's already been done here. I do have a relationship with Susan Clare, and she's very supportive of these projects that I come up with, and I'm quite certain that she would have some level of interest from the community garden to support this, and I think it would just be an awesome complement to what they're doing over there too.
If you don't mind, one more question.
Yeah.
Are you thinking there'd be like a board of people who run the food forest, who help you to write the grant applications and sort of like organize the people using it and maintaining it?
Well, one of the things that we would be able to utilize is the Boston Food Forest Coalition. We could write grants through them. They're a nonprofit. They do that kind of work. They're spooled up to make this stuff happen already. But yes, absolutely. If this turned into, I'm trying to keep my aspirations very humble right now, because converting an orchard to a food forest just makes sense, and I can't imagine that anybody would say that's a bad idea. But man, there's a lot of stuff that we could do. I've talked a lot with Joe Greeley about the idea of doing edible trails. Having lots of food along the hiking trails would just be an awesome thing for, to create a more dynamic hiking experience for people and for kids to learn how to, find forage for food and, what you can eat and what you can't eat. These could be outdoor hiking classes. One of the things that I'm getting ready to do at Planet Food Forest is get a bunch of tree sections to serve as outdoor classroom seating, because that one is associated with a local nonprofit middle school. And we're still kind of building momentum. The pandemic really took a lot of steam out of everything, but they come out there and they learn to sheet mulch. They learn to care for their trees. They name their trees and put little signs on them. And we're going to start having actual classes out there where, we teach them about stormwater runoff mitigation. There's so many things that have happened, like working with the watershed associations and things like that. Aligning with other groups that are doing similar work. This is a great at-risk youth type of project. There's so many things to this that I couldn't possibly talk about all of them in a meeting, or, and I'm sure nobody has the bandwidth for all of the possibilities that are involved. But if we can start a food forest, there are literally 100 things that could come out of this, and so many things that could benefit the community. Plus, it's a very forward-thinking project, and I know Tony is really. He's an amazing town manager. I really appreciate the fact that this kind of stuff is on his radar. To be quite honest, I would like one good example, because this is something that I would like to do on every town property that's just a barren, dirt-covered spot, or any open space that we can possibly fit one of these into, because it does nothing but improve any place you put these things. And the biggest challenge, I think, is just creating that community that wants to be involved in this and wants to actually get out there and help make these things happen and thrive.
Thank you.
Thank you for those thoughtful questions, Ms. Rockland. Do we have other questions? Ms. Miller.
Thanks. Just a question about costs. Do you have an estimate for how much it would cost to get this up and running, and what would be included? I assume you'd have to buy the plants and seeds. Would we need additional materials to do maintenance, and what's kind of the universe of things that would need to be factored into cost, and how much?
So
thanks.
The cost for a typical fruit tree guild is about $600. That's with everything. That's labor. That's materials. We're not talking about labor, so we basically cut that in, about in half. The amount of plants for each tree, I think if you added up $600 for 48 trees, I think it's about $29,000. But if you have that with no labor, you'd get a cost of about $300. So that's about $15,000. to polyculture this entire thing. Now, wood chips are free. That does include mulch. So we typically use wood chips. The town has compost. They've offered to do any kind of heavy lifting here and support this in any way necessary. At least that's my understanding, and I'm going with that. But essentially, there are local. I use Southridge Farm and Nursery. They only have so much. There are two other suppliers. One of them is strictly native plants, which I'm a big fan of. Another one is in a place called Edible Landscapes. He's down towards the Cape. They're two people that have been very supportive. So essentially, these folks are trying to make these kinds of projects happen. So they're generally very inexpensive. I'm not speaking for Southridge, but the cost is probably far less than $300 each is the bottom line. Probably quite a bit less. But if we use that as a baseline, we can't really, we won't get unpleasantly surprised. And, one of the things I like to keep in mind is that we're also kind of supporting local businesses by doing this. And we would hope that local businesses are supporting us as well. One of the things that we like to do is invite businesses to kind of be a part of this. Everybody wants food when they go out to projects like this. So typically you want to bring a vendor in that is willing to supply food. Sometimes there's a budget for that. Sometimes there's not, and they donate it. But it just depends. We make it work. Every project's different.
Ms. Capizio.
Let me know when you can hear me.
We can hear you now.
Can you hear me? Great. Thanks. Wonderful. So I'm a proponent of the project. It's very exciting to hear about the different aspects of what you'd like to do. I concur with Carly. I think you definitely need someone who's confidently behind the scenes or managing this in a way that doesn't rely entirely on volunteer effort. Community is always great, but you need someone who's going to be accountable from start to finish. And I support Heather, in wanting to see some type of budget or look at, what those figures would be for what I suggest is a maybe more scaled down version to start. I mean, maybe we could pilot this in a smaller capacity, not the entire orchard. And if it runs successfully for a year, and if we start to see some fruition after a year, then, we can also use that budget to scale up. And I think, that would be helpful for those who want to get involved. Everyone wants to get involved when things are working. So, having a pilot year where you have some success, I'm speaking from experience, generally is that kind of that affidavit of proof that this is going to work for the community. And also to follow up, I do think it should be community run. I love this idea of the Boston Food Forest helping us out and getting us off our feet and helping us launch. But essentially, I think it should be locally driven. So that's why you're here.
I couldn't agree with you more. And let me just lay out one more aspect of this. So essentially, I live, I think I'm about 1.5 miles away from the site. And I take personal responsibility for getting this project going and doing what needs to be done in order to meet your requirements. One of the things that is really great about this project is you can do 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 trees. It doesn't matter. You can do a few at a time, and you can see how over time those trees develop versus the other trees that have not been mulched or polycultured. You start off with the sheet mulching. That doesn't cost anything. You get some cardboard, you get some wood chips, you kind of set up the site for the work to be done, and then you just start mulching 1 tree at a time. You create the mulch bed around it, and you plan for the plants. Ideally, the wood chips sit there for a year to build the microbes and the soil, and then you plant. Of course, you could do it much quicker too. And my belief is that plants would start showing up pretty early if we started doing this stuff, and probably lots of plants. And I don't like to plan for the good surprises, because that's never a good way to plan these things. But I've had hundreds of dollars of plants already show up at Planet Subaru that we put in there. We haven't spent a dime on the extra plants. They had the initial ones, the initial fruit trees and bushes. But point being, yes, I agree with you. This can start in the spring if it gets approved. It doesn't have to be everything that I discussed right away, and it certainly most likely wouldn't be under any circumstances. But that work of sheet mulching the individual trees could start right away and cost nothing. And there are enough volunteers to do that.
I just wanted to follow up that if you're planning on down the road, if you're planning on composting, I think in general we just need to make sure anyone who abuts the area is aware of what kinds of projects will be taking place there. But composting releases methane. It's gas. There are ways to mitigate that, but it also can have a very pungent smell. I know earthworms is a solution that some people use to help with mitigating the smell of composting. And then really just any augmentations done to that site, as you mentioned, need to come in partnership with anyone who's already using the space, and anyone who's surrounding the area, really should just be aware of what's going to transpire there. So, I think just general notice there.
Ms. Rockland?
You had mentioned compost, town compost. And I was curious, has the town compost been tested for lead levels or any other levels that would be of concern in growing produce that's going to be eaten? Because I don't know this. I wonder if anyone else here knows that. That would probably be something to find out before using it for a garden of edibles.
Yeah, town compost, to be perfectly honest, it's a little bit of an unknown, because that's everybody in the town putting whatever into their bags. It's a little bit scary, and to be quite honest, I think I would want to get a more controlled compost. But you work with what you've got, and I agree. Whatever requirements. This would of course be your project. I mean, the town would own it in a sense, and it would have to be whatever the town wants it to be. One thing you mentioned, that this project would be very similar to what's going on with the community garden already. So there would be no additional issues compared to what's already happening there. And what usually has the bad smell is like raw compost. It's when you're putting new material in there, like food waste. But generally, if you're getting loads of compost and then maybe you're adding material that's coming from the garden to it, as long as it's being maintained, turned a lot, it's not it shouldn't be an issue as far as smell. But then again, that depends on the size of it, of course. So.
Ms. Walsh?
So a few questions, and I totally like the idea of it too, and I think it sounds terrific, and I bet it will take off. But the anxiety that I have is, so first of all, Heather asked about a budget, and so I understand that the budget, it seems low. So is it your intention that the town would seed fund that?
Well, I would hope so. I mean, to be quite honest, I think that I think that funding at some point would be available, but you have to create a pipeline. So something has to seed it. But again, I have to emphasize that anything that we do is gonna help. Just sheet mulching that site is gonna help tremendously. Just that portion of it is gonna help those plants. And
So I have a few follow-ons, so and then you said that the town would own this. And so I guess my question, and maybe it's to other commissioners or Holly, who actually owns it? Is it DPW? Is it Conservation Commission? Who would sort of be your liaison at the town? Because it sounds like you've already had some conversations with Joe Greeley. You've had some conversations, I assume, with DPW that said that they might be willing to provide some labor or mulch or some additional services.
So the discussions I've had have been with Paul Halkiadis and some with Tony Mazzucco in the past. He is eager to fund projects like this. I don't know what the realities are, but there was one project that we started that actually went idle, but he did, without us even knowing, he funded it for the entire cost of the plants. It was about $3,500. We didn't even know that. We just found out that he made those funds available. Now, I'm not suggesting that that might happen here. I'm just simply saying that he would. I think there is that possibility. And as I said, when you start these things, sometimes plants just start showing up. Sometimes at the end of the season, a lot of places have got a lot of plants just to get rid of because they're going to die and they need to get rid of them. They literally give them away. That could happen. We could start sheet mulching this thing and just be doing that all summer long. And at the end of the season, somebody could say, "Hey, I got a whole bunch of plants. You better get some people together to plant them." Again, I don't like to plan for those things, but that can happen. The other thing too is that as people start, doing this, I have a food forest here. I have extra plants all the time. And that's how these things work. You just start splitting stuff off and you need to find a home for it. And I've always got stuff that I can't possibly fit that I need to find a home for. So but that's all about kind of building that community. Once people start, getting involved, and I'm sure people in the community garden are gonna want to donate plants. I mean, you have to kind of pick your plants too. You can't just put anything in there, but there's a lot of sharing that goes on. And, I've got plants that people have given me that I can't even use, that I'm putting them in my food forest as, kind of a nursery for them. And I'll dig them up and move them somewhere else at some point. I've got 3 pawpaw trees that, I'm hoping they all grow, and I would love to donate a pawpaw tree to this because it's the only native North American fruit tree. It's a pretty cool tree. So anyway, it's
and so I have one final question. So when you say we, we're coming for approval and we'll follow your instructions, who is we? Is it you as a Norwood resident who is agreeing to spearhead this project, or is it we and part of the Boston Food Forest Coalition is with you?
Well, I do have the support of the Boston Food Forest Coalition. This is me as a Norwood resident. This is me and my little 7-year-old Ruby. We will be there. This is my dad right across the street. He's committed to working on it. There's another guy named Dan Breen. He's now a Brookline firefighter, but he's from Norwood. He wants to work on this. My friend Sam, he's in Middleborough, but he is committed to this. He wants to do it. Hopefully we'll have people from Grace Episcopal Church helping us out because we plan to help them work on their orchard this year. But we had a big group show up when Sam did a pruning seminar over there. Had a lot of interest in that, and that's one of the things that will draw people in is when you say I'm going to teach you how to prune your fruit trees for free. You know, people will show up, and some of those people will say, I'd really like to help out here. But we just kind of got to start that, and I'd be willing to bet you that a couple of posts on Norwood Now would really draw people in. You know.
Folks will have to forgive me. My video is being very slow this evening. If I miss a hand, just speak up, I think.
I just had a question, and this might be a question for Steve or Holly, but at one of our earlier meetings, and I was very new at the time, we talked about replacing trees. Was that these trees? Are they being replaced?
Yeah, that is these. So these trees, the 48 apple trees, are on land that's owned by the Conservation Commission, and many of them did not make it through this past summer, but they were under warranty from where they were purchased, and so this spring we'll be able to go and get replacement trees for the ones that didn't survive.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Gear or Mr. Bamber, anything to add? Mr. Gear, please.
I think the concept sounds great. I'm particularly interested in getting kids involved. Something, if you get them early enough, and they develop an interest in it, that'll kind of perpetuate the whole thing too. So I think that sounds great, and it just seems like we have to get organized on it. But I'm all behind it. I think it sounds great.
I appreciate that. I agree. It is all about the kids. I mean, I'm really excited for the project at Planet Subaru. When we've gotten our legs taken out from under us with the pandemic, but this is going to be a good year, and the kids are going to be much more involved, and I'm excited about that because we need 10-year-olds and 12-year-olds doing this stuff, because in a few years this is going to be more and more important, and I don't think anybody would disagree. They need to eat better, and this is the best way to learn how to eat better, is to grow your own food.
I think it sounds great.
Thank you, Mr. Gear. Mr. Bamber?
I think it sounds great, but listening to what Ms. Capizio and Ms. Walsh said, I think I'd like to see a pilot project put on paper with an associated cost, frankly, but otherwise it sounds like a good idea. A little plan, because right now it seems pretty, I saw a slide.
Thank you, Mr. Bamber. I would personally say that I think this is a wonderful concept. I was really enthusiastic when the concept of a community orchard was born, and I still endearingly call it the baby orchard, and I hope that at some point it'll be a full-grown orchard, and I see this as being like potential rocket fuel for that future. I do think that there seems to be a lot of need for maybe a more formal proposal for what we intend to do and an associated cost, but I think that this is absolutely a positive project for the area, for the community, for all the reasons that were really outlined in the presentation and beyond. So I certainly think this is a wonderful idea. And I would like to hear from Ms. Jones about how maybe Concom and Mr. Negron and other elements of our community can kind of work together to create a more formal maybe group of people working on this and a more formal plan to bring it into fruition. Ms. Jones?
Okay. And anyone else, please feel free to chime in. It seems like there's a few options, both for the actual work and for a group overseeing this work. So there could be a town-based committee, similarly to the Trails Committee, perhaps, or there could be a committee that's maybe not part of the town infrastructure formally, but is like a Friends of Baby Orchard, or whatever we may call it, overseeing this type of work, that myself and others in the town staff support and interface with. As far as the work goes, it seems like from what Mr. Negron has shared with us, the first step to this project is sheet mulching the orchard, which can be done with free materials and volunteer labor, and both lays the groundwork for a future permaculture guild project, and would still be beneficial even if a permaculture guild project never materialized. So that seems like one way to start building momentum that doesn't have a lot of downsides as far as I can tell. And then it seems to me that we can, I think that putting a budget together and putting together a pilot project is a good idea. And we have the potential to start working on this section or tree at a time. I'm not sure what the available funding sources may be, either from the town, from sponsored businesses, from grants, but it does seem like something where we don't have to find all $15,000 at once. And so I think I would say that maybe it would make sense to form some type of committee and move forward with the sheet mulching, and as funds become available, move forward with the permaculture project as organized in work days through whatever friends group or committee is created. Does that make sense?
And if you don't mind, if I chime in, I think the big question is, this is Concom property. If you guys like the idea, that's the most important question right now. As Holly said, we could, if the idea is approved to start sheet mulching right away, it's not going to take much to get that to happen, and I can take the lead on that. The other thing I wanted to mention was that I think that one idea might be to take one of those fruit tree gills, one of those sheet mulched trees, and plant one fruit tree guild, and I could go to each supplier and ask them, do you want to donate some plants to this as kind of a pilot? Hopefully with the idea that they would be our suppliers if this project gets approved for a budget, or maybe we even get funding through some sort of grant. Who knows? But the point being just that at least we could have one fruit tree guild that might cost little to nothing. I think between me and a couple of the folks that I know, we could come up with enough plants to do one. And if we don't, we come up short. It's still not a big deal. You kind of get the idea. But I think over the course of the summer, we could at least give, we could possibly get one guild put together so that people could start to see what the rest of them might look like, and it would be a little bit more real for folks.
Ms. Rockland?
A question, in terms of sheet mulching. One thing that I've heard from other gardeners is that in terms of like using wood chips on top of soil, it can actually take away from the nutrients in the soil. And so is there like data on using wood chips, with, you're talking about the sort of lasagna, like stacking with cardboard and producing the microorganisms or nutrients you're looking for? Is leaf mold, they call it, like leaf mulch, a better option? I guess that's a concern. If you like wanted to immediately start on this, I would want to just make sure that wood chips and the cardboard are an effective way to boost up the soil productivity.
Well, I'm certainly not a soil scientist, but I know that there are lots of different experiences out there, and there are plenty of opinions, and and I don't discount any of that. But I can tell you that what my experience has been, and what the folks that I work with, there are lots and lots of them, that this is a generally accepted method. I can tell you that I had a barren pizza slice of lawn in my front that, excuse me, that I did use leaf mulch on this particular spot, but over cardboard, and then wood chips on top of that. But I put an herb garden in there, and it's taken off like nothing I ever expected. Only thing I'm trying to say is that my personal experience is that I've never experienced that it was detrimental in any way. That it's nothing but good. But of course, all conditions are different. You never know. There could very well be something, but there's a lot of material. There's a lot of grass that's already on the soil where we'd be doing this. We would be going right on top of that, so all of that would decompose, and that's a lot of nutrients right there. I think I understand what they're trying to say, but the point of a fruit tree guild is that you are putting nutrients down in this. There are nutrient building plants. There are nitrogen fixers. They are doing all these different jobs in the soil, and the idea is that they kind of all work together to create the ideal conditions. So it's not just sheet mulching and then you say, okay, I'm going to go plant something there and see how it does. It's a kind of a system of regenerating the soil.
Thank you.
Ms. Capizio?
Yeah, Carly kind of inspired this thinking. I guess, do you have an idea of a timeline? I mean, does it make sense to go out and sheet mulch now? Is there a better time later, perhaps mid-March or something that's more appropriate? Or, I mean, I don't. So I guess I'm really asking for your experience.
Well, there are a couple of things that factor into it, but it's mostly weather. I mean, you can. sheet mulching can be done anytime. And, the more time it has to sit on the ground, on the soil, the better. It does usually need to age for about a year before it's ideal for planting. But, I planted right away and it works too. It's just not, I'm sure it's not ideal. But yeah, I mean, it could start immediately. There's no reason why not. It's just a matter of finding the time to get out there and do it.
I would suggest if we're trying to have a community work day, though, we might want to wait for a nicer weather than January or February.
That is true. The volunteer days, you definitely want to. I guess the next couple of months would probably be very unpredictable. They could be very, very cold. Anything can happen at any time of the year, but it would be probably better to wait a little while to try to get the volunteer days together. I'm working on the one at Planet Subaru right now, but and I plan, now that I see some progress, you can kind of see a flow to things. We probably will get a few volunteers together, but you just kind of you play it by ear. You may get rained out, but you may be able to get a few people together, and depending on the groups that you have, you may be able to get some really great work done. So I don't count anything out. And this really it is a really organic type of project. You might have people showing up out of interest, and you might have enough people one day to get some work done. It's hard to say, but you might be there thinking you're going to be just one or two people getting a little bit done, and a couple people might show up and you might get a lot more done. But I try to go with the flow on these things and get what I can accomplished when the conditions present themselves. So, but yeah. I'm happy to start on it right away. One of the things that's important is, you got to kind of start staging stuff. You got to start getting a lot of cardboard in there. You got to find a way to store it. I've kind of figured out that you can take a few pallets and lay them down, and you can stack cardboard on top of that, and you can put a couple of pallets on top of that. I know it sounds crazy, but this was an epiphany for me, because you need to get a whole bunch of cardboard's hard to move around if you don't have it right there. Moving a whole bunch of cardboard, the amounts we need, you need a big truck, really, and you have to have that available. So I find a source for it, and I kind of get it as I can. And with this system, you can just store it as long as you need to, because it really doesn't deteriorate, significantly over the course of months. And you can have a nice stack of it when you're ready. And you need to stage your materials. Your wood chips have to be there. You got to get tools on site. Ideally, we probably want a toolbox. We can work around things like that, but that would be on my wish list, to have a toolbox and to have tools there that are dedicated to that site. But that doesn't always happen. So sometimes we just bring it. But you just, like I said, you got to kind of play it by ear. We could make this happen with almost nothing, and the more the better.
I have to say, I can't imagine you having too much trouble with cardboard. My house certainly produces more cardboard than we can get rid of in a 2-week period. The COVID has inspired the most reckless Amazon purchasing that I've ever seen in my life. So you probably have a lot of sources of cardboard across the town if you just tell people, and they're happy to get rid of it.
Well, yes, exactly. If it's possible to store it there, if I can find a spot that nobody objects to, where I could put a couple of pallets and stack it up and put a couple of pallets on top of that, it would be great if people could just come and put it there. The only thing is that all the tape has to be removed, all the plastic tape. So that's very important. It can't have varnish on it. You want basically just regular craft corrugated cardboard. no plastic tape that has to be removed, no shipping label pouches. You want to get all that stuff off before it goes in that stack. But other than that, yeah, it's just, it would be great if people had a spot where they could, bring cardboard. And I'll bet you anything, you're right. If we put the word out, that people would just start bringing it by. And then it would just be a matter of making sure that people are putting the pallets back and it's secure and it's not blowing all over the property there or something. We don't want that, obviously. But yeah, I found a nice little gully at Planet Subaru where the wind won't hit it, and I put a pallet in, and then I just put wood chips next to it. Wood chips are like one of the coolest materials you can possibly get, because you can do so much with them, and that's a good example. Just kind of a big pile of wood chips around a pallet, and then I'm starting to stack cardboard there and throw a pallet on top of that. I think it's going to work great. So yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Negron. Ms. Jones, what I'm hearing is that it sounds like generally the entirety of the commission is in supportive of the concept, and there are just some concerns surrounding the execution, cost, planning, and beyond. At this point, do you think an appropriate motion might be for the commission to approve Mr. Negron to work further with you, Ms. Jones, to establish potential resources within the town and maybe begin to develop a more official proposal for this activity? Or what do you suggest, Ms. Jones?
I think that is certainly, it sounds like the direction the commission is headed. Just to maybe get some more direction for the official proposal, that would include things like a more hammered out timeline, materials needed, the financial details, anything else that
I think where specifically on the plot, would you begin, and is it 25%? Are you looking at 25% of what's there, 30% of what's there, 15%, of the total square footage?
Holly, if I could jump in.
I think it would also, just one other thing, I think it would also be good, if maybe we could check with DPW or something. I agree, if we can start collecting the cardboard, that would be great, but that area is so flat, so I don't think you're going to get that opportunity. And if you're just stacking pallets on top of cardboard, the pallet's going to, get moved. And so I'm wondering if, perhaps DPW could help construct a little something, so I think it's just something to consider.
Yeah,
Well,
or maybe we could even find another location that might be better suited to storing cardboard for a couple months.
Yeah,
but I can talk to DPW about that.
And I would be, I'd be happy to meet you out there, Holly, and just kind of walk through the site and kind of get if that would be helpful. And I can certainly come up with a, an outline on my end, if it would be helpful, of how we could, the specifics about how we could make this, happen, how we could start it. And I can get that material to you, and whatever you need from me, I'd be happy to, work with you over the course of the next few weeks and provide that information so that you have it to interface with the commission, if that's helpful.
Okay.
Ms. Rockman, I see your hand.
I think I think it would also be a helpful thing to include in this, like a summary of a plan for community engagement. So it can become like a sustainable long-term project. I think it'd be helpful to have that direction in there.
I think that's an excellent idea. I've had so many conversations about this, and there's so much enthusiasm behind this idea. But the big question is, has always been, would the town, would you folks want to do it? That's mainly why no conversations have gone any further, of course, it wouldn't be appropriate. But if, the moment you say, yes, we'd like to do it, I'd be more than happy to start conversations with the community garden folks and the trail committee folks and whoever I know that I could go to. And I think from there, I think a lot of things could spiderweb. But I don't think there's going to be any shortage of folks that'll be interested in getting involved with this, and it's just a matter of reaching out to them. Once we know whether or not this should move forward, and I'm more than happy to take the lead on that. That's definitely something I can offer.
One more thought. What might also be helpful for folks in terms of, thinking about their potential commitment to this project, and I don't just mean our commission, I mean people in general, to get them involved, is visiting other food forests that exist. So they could get an idea in their head of what it could be here in Norwood.
I would absolutely encourage anybody that's interested in this to be involved with the Boston Food Forest Coalition, and there are lots and lots of opportunities to do that. We do garden raisings. We go to people's homes and help them start gardens. Just get a group of volunteers to do that. We have weeding parties where everybody comes to a food forest and weeds, and there are lots of things that go on. There's lots of activities. I would love to be a conduit for that as well. I love sharing this activity with folks, and I'm the biggest fan of the Boston Food Forest Coalition, and getting people interested and involved I met my neighbor right across the street in Dorchester doing a garden raising. I didn't even know the guy, and he lives right across the street from me. And so it's definitely, it's just a really great community to be involved with. And ideally, this is not just something I'd like to see happening at Ending. I'd love to see people in Norwood saying, I want to create a food forest in my yard. Can you help? And, help them, help organize volunteers to do garden raisings here in Norwood. I think that would be awesome. But there is so much opportunity to do just that for folks to go visit these places. We can certainly schedule a tour anytime, but there's a great one at the Boston Nature Center, the headquarters of the Mass Audubon Society in Mattapan. There's some really interesting sites. We've talked about, I don't want to go off on a tangent. I don't want to take a bunch of your time, but there's so many cool things that can come out of this. Getting involved with the watershed associations, we could organize kayaking trips that go down the Neponset River. There's the new property on St. Streets, but there's also a new food forest in Mattapan that's right on the Neponset River. And, we've talked about some pretty cool projects that could kind of come out of this and be related to it, but really awesome things to get kids involved with, so that they can really understand why this type of activity is really important to keep, to mitigate stormwater runoff, and, for them to actually see these beautiful waterways that are just getting choked up with trash, because of all of the non-porous surfaces, impervious surfaces, and how creating more food forests, actually helps problems like that. But anyway, I could go on and on, but the point just being that there's a tremendous amount of stuff to come out of this, and that's what I start getting really excited about, So I can absolutely interface with the Boston Food Forest Coalition and find those opportunities for folks. That's the short version of a response to your comment.
Thank you, Mr. Negron. Your enthusiasm is infectious, I assure you. Mr. Bamber, you've had your hand up for quite some time, at least on my screen, please.
I'd like to make a motion to have Holly Jones work with Mark Negron to move this forward.
I'll second that.
All right. As we've been doing in the remote environment, I'm going to go down the list of conservation commissioners and just ask you to state your position on this vote, one member at a time, starting with myself. Stephen Washburn is in favor. Aye. Chris Capizia.
Aye.
Peter Bamber. John Gear.
Aye.
Heather Miller.
Aye.
Carly Rockland.
Aye.
And Catherine Walsh.
Aye.
Thank you. Well, it sounds like there's a lot of enthusiasm surrounding this project, and I very much look forward to seeing where this is going to go. As I stated previously, I think this could absolutely be part of the recipe for success at the Baby Orchard, and I definitely want to be involved in it. So thank you for coming tonight, Mr. Negron. We could surely talk about it all evening, but we do have other agenda items to get through. So I think we will leave it at this for tonight, and we look forward to hearing more either via Ms. Jones or yourself at a future meeting.
And I'd just like to say it's really been a huge pleasure meeting all of you, and I'm really grateful for your support and interest and enthusiasm about this project. I'm really excited and looking forward to it, and just want to thank you for your time and for being behind this project. I appreciate it. It's really awesome.
Oh, very good. Thank you again for being here, Mr. Negron. Ms. Jones, do you have anything else on this topic before we move on?
No, it sounds like myself and Mr. Negron have our marching orders, so we'll report back shortly.
Wonderful. All right. Next up on our agenda, it looks like we're going to have. No, thank you again for being here.
You're very
next
welcome.
on the agenda, it looks like we're going to have approval of final St. Street lot conservation restriction. Ms. Jones?
Yeah, so this restriction, this conservation restriction is the vote that you all would be taking tonight is for the Conservation Commission, the owner of the land, to grant the conservation restriction to the Wildlands Trust. And I think that the commission has already approved a conservation restriction, but the state has actually gone in and edited the one which was previously approved. There are no major changes, but they edited some of the language about easements. And so now it's different and has to be approved again. And so hopefully you all are still planning to grant the easement. So do you all have any questions about that? Okay.
I don't think any questions. If there are no questions, we could have, I guess, a motion to approve and grant the NORD conservation restriction, EEA reference number 16858, last edited December 23rd, 2020, to the Wildlands Trust, Inc., pursuant to Section 32 of Chapter 184 and Section 8C of Chapter 40 of the Massachusetts General Laws, if someone felt like making that motion.
I'll make that motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. As we've been doing in the remote environment, we'll go down the list of Conservation Commission members and just ask you to verbally state your position on this vote, starting with myself. Stephen Washburn is in favor. Aye. Chris Capizia.
Aye.
Peter Bamber.
Aye.
John Gear.
Aye.
Heather Miller.
Aye.
Carly Rockland.
Aye.
Catherine Walsh.
Aye.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Next on our agenda, Conservation Commission business, we have discussion of authorizing agent to electronically sign Conservation Commission documents on behalf of members during the COVID-19 state of emergency. Ms. Jones.
Okay, so this item and the next item on the agenda are related. There's two different signing requirements for documents that are issued by the commission. The DEP requires a quorum of signatures of the commissioners on their documents, while the registry doesn't care about your signatures, but just needs to make sure that somebody has signed with a pen. And so this vote pertains to granting myself the ability to electronically sign documents on your behalf to meet with DEP regulations. If you are comfortable granting me that ability, should the commission approve both of these, then essentially if you make a vote in a meeting, I can sign for you the next day and issue that decision the next day, and it can be recorded. I would make a note of essentially a record of this vote, which would be recorded at the Registry of Deeds, that you had voted to allow me to sign on your behalf, and then that recorded vote would be referenced on those decisions that were issued during the COVID-19 state of emergency. A number of commissions have operated this way. I took the language for these motions from Weston. They were very gracious in assisting with that. I will say my commission in Uxbridge wanted to continue to wet sign for themselves. They thought that was important to them. And so if you want to keep doing that, then that is totally fine and we can make it work. But I think since I've been so rarely in the office, this would make it easier for me to issue documents in a timely way.
Thank you, Holly. Something that you touched on, I think, in your description that makes me very comfortable with the situation is that you'll only be signing documents that we've had a vote on during a meeting that's been recorded. There won't be random documents that you're signing just based on, demand, personal opinion, or otherwise. So for me, it seems to make perfect sense, but I would love to hear from the rest of the commission. Mr. Bamber.
Do we need two separate motions or just one motion for both? You said there
I
were two
would
different.
prefer if you made two separate motions, because I wrote them out very carefully in my suggested motions. And one of them, the second motion is the one that has to be recorded. So the motion that I'm suggesting now to allow myself to electronically sign on your behalf doesn't have to be recorded, and the next one does.
I don't know if I don't have any problem with it. If nobody has an issue with it, I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
All right. As we've been doing in the remote environment, I'm going to go down the list of Conservation Commission members and just ask you to verbally state your position on this vote, starting with myself. Stephen Washburn is in favor. Aye. Chris Capizia.
Aye.
Peter Bamber.
Aye.
John Gear.
Aye.
Heather Miller.
Aye.
Carly Rothman.
Aye.
Catherine Walsh.
Aye.
Thank you. All right. And then I believe the second part of this discussion requires a motion that will authorize the agent to physically sign Conservation Commission documents. Suggested motion might be moved to suggest that the Norwood Conservation Commission authorize conservation agent Holly Jones to physically sign Norwood Conservation Commission documents on behalf of the Conservation Commission. The term Norwood Conservation Commission documents, as used in the preceding sentence, means only those documents that the Norwood Conservation Commission voted to issue and sign at a public meeting during the COVID-19 state of emergency.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Bamber and Mr. Gear. As we've been doing in the remote environment, I will go down the list of Conservation Commission members and just ask you to verbally state your position on this vote, starting with myself. Stephen Washburn is in favor. Aye. Chris Capizia.
Aye.
Peter Bamber.
Aye.
John Gear.
Aye.
Heather Miller.
Aye.
Carly Rockland.
Aye.
And Catherine Walsh.
Aye.
Thank you. Yeah, I think this makes perfect sense and hopefully reduces some of the runaround that Ms. Jones has been subjected to as a byproduct of this complication. Excellent. Next up on the agenda, we actually have the conservation agent's report. So right back to you, Ms. Jones.
Oh,
Can I just ask a quick question before we move on?
Please do,
I
Ms.
don't think anything in the language that we just approved would prohibit it, but should we make it clear that this applies to anything that is also currently pending? I think there were a few other approvals that you were waiting on our signatures on. Is that right? Or was it just the order of conditions from tonight?
yeah, there is the request for determination of applicability for Moderna.
Mhm.
And the revised order of or amended order of conditions for lot 5 Brook Street. However, lot 5 Brook Street, they want to amend it again. And so that will be before you all again very soon. And so I'm going to, we no longer need to issue that amended order of conditions because they're asking for a further amendment. So it may be, yeah, I think it would can't hurt to clarify that this can apply to pending decisions, just so that we're able to do it for the request for determination for Moderna.
Yeah, I think it might just be helpful to have that on the record, even though I don't think it's precluded by any of the language we just approved.
So does someone want to make a motion to the effect that those approvals for the agent to sign electronically and physically on behalf of the commission apply to decisions which have already been voted on by the commission and are have yet to be issued?
Yeah, I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Thank you. As we've been doing in the remote environment, I will go down the list of Conservation Commission members and just ask you to verbally state your position on this vote, starting with myself. Stephen Washburn is in favor. Aye. Chris Capizia.
Aye.
Peter Bamber.
Aye.
John Gear.
Aye.
Heather Miller.
Aye.
Carly Rockland.
Aye.
And Catherine Walsh.
Aye.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Heather. I think that was very thoughtful.
That's helpful. So conservation agent report. Again, I don't have too much to say. The exciting news from the office is that we got our bids in for the St. Street lot and picked a contractor to start developing that project. There's a committee of myself and the planning staff and Mr. Greeley who did that. And so we're excited to start that process. The conservation restriction that you all just voted on is also going to be voted on by the Board of Selectmen on, I believe, the 26th. And so we should be able to get that taken care of quickly. What else? Let's see. I'm working on a trails grant for the design for trails at the University Ave conservation land and the Walker property this week. That's a big thing that I've been focusing on. And that is all I have for you all.
Ms.
Catherine.
Walsh.
Ms. Walsh.
Do you guys want a 2-minute update of the community preservation meeting on January 13th? Okay. So it was a relatively short meeting. We voted on the previous month's minutes. There's a new CPC member. Her name's Julie Barber Issa, and Norwood resident. She's been in Norwood for 11 years, and she's a civil engineer that works in a design firm in Weymouth, so she seems like a good add. So the bulk of the meeting was the discussion about the Carolyn project, and Lee Leach, who is the proponent and really working with the town to get that completed. There was the woman who heads up procurement. Ooh, I forget her name. I can't remember her name, but anyway, say again.
I think it's Kathy Kearney.
Yeah, that's right. So she was on and just went over the bids. The painting bids came in. There's enough money in the unrestricted funds to fund that, but there's some hoops they need to jump through. So there is a January 27th public hearing at 5:30 where the Carolyn project will be voted on, and that will enable it to get a final vote at the special town meeting, which I believe is on February 4th. And then they're also working on closing out the St. Gabriel Chapel project. And the closeout has a remaining balance of $88,000, which will go back to the unrestricted account. So the February meeting, they're going to do a little bit of a membership update because they have terms on their membership. And then Kathy also asked that in the future, that before applications get submitted to the CPC or concurrently, that there's a review by town procurement to make sure that that they build in enough contingency and sort of make some provisions so we're not in the situation with Caroline where we don't have money, we have to go back for a special vote, and anyway, just be more streamlined. So relatively short meeting, and that's it. Any questions? Carly? Oh, I've taken over, Steve, sorry.
I have questions on another matter. I wondered if I could peg them on after this discussion.
So, and I managed not to put the CPC report back on the agenda. So I think we shouldn't discuss it too much further. Although it's public, and so I'm glad we got that report back. So thank you.
Ms. Rockcliffe?
Wondering, as a new Concom member, and I'm pretty new to Norwood, I've been here about 1.5 years or less, wondering if it would be possible to visit the conservation lands we're talking about, like the Saint Street lot and then the conservation land along University Ave, if that's something that several of us would want to do, or.
Yes, actually, the Trails Committee is having a walk this coming Sunday at the University Ave property at 2:30. And they're looking at, I don't know the address of the University Ave property, but if you Google hot dog vendor University Ave, that is how you find it.
True.
It's right next to the Boston Skating Club, directly to the north of the Boston Skating Club.
That's actually my favorite property in town. So if anyone else has the availability, I encourage you to be there.
And do we are. Sorry.
I was going to say, otherwise, I think it's a great idea to do maybe more weekend walks of other conservation property, and I'd be excited to join commissioners for that.
Same. I love that idea.
I should probably
Yes.
know this, but does the Trails Committee have a Facebook site? Is that where you would find information about that? Or is it on the website?
They don't have a Facebook page. I'm not sure where they're going to post information about that. But I know because Joe Greeley emailed me, and
Yeah.
I should have said so earlier. And I think he told me he was going to advertise it maybe on Norwood Now. I'm just gonna check.
We typically post on Norwood Now, and there's a lot of like word of mouth through the Trails Committee folks. But yeah, I do not believe they have like any, like an Instagram, a Facebook, any specific to the Trails group social media presence.
Yeah, Joe's email just said Sue agreed to put out a social media notice, but it doesn't say where. So we can anticipate maybe Norwood Now, but you're also welcome to email myself, or I'm sure Mr. Greeley would happily submit to emails for clarification.
All right, and was that the end of the agent report, Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Okay, and we have minutes to approve, is that true?
Yep, you have minutes from December 16th to approve.
Do I have a motion related to the approval of said minutes?
Motion to approve December 16th minutes.
A second.
Thank you. As we've been doing in the remote environment, I'll go down the list of Conservation Commission members one by one and just ask you to verbally state your position on this vote, starting with myself. Stephen Washburn is in favor. Aye. Chris Capizio.
Aye.
Peter Bamber.
Aye.
John Gear.
Aye.
Heather Miller.
Aye.
Carly Rockland.
Aye.
Catherine Walsh.
Aye.
Thank you. I think with that wrapped up, I could entertain an additional motion, Mr. Bamber.
Motion to adjourn.
I have a second.
A second.
Thank you. As we've been doing in the remote environment, I'll go down the list of Conservation Commission members one by one and ask you to verbally state your position on this vote, starting with myself. Stephen Washburn is in favor. Aye. Chris Capizio.
Aye.
Peter Bamber.
Aye.
John Gear.
Aye.
Heather Miller.
Aye.
Carly Rockland.
Aye.
Catherine Walsh.
Aye.
Thanks very much for being here tonight, gang. I hope I will see as many of you as possible on Sunday.
Was
Missed
that
you last time.
2:30?
2:30.
Is that 2:30? Yeah.
I'm sorry, what is that, Sunday at 2:30?
That's the walk at the University Ave property.
Oh, yes, the walk. Okay, well, maybe. All right, thank you very much.
Good
Thank
night.
you. Bye, guys.